Whoa. It's a cabin in the woods. We need to go hide over in there.
Nah, man, I'm not going in there. It reminds me of a horror movie I once saw.
What horror movie?
The one with the cabin in the woods.
Welcome back, everybody. Yesterday I saw M. Night Shyamalan's Knockatthecabin. Now, Mr. Shyamalan's movies usually end up being really hit or miss. Sometimes they're really good and can really throw you for a loop. And sometimes they're just plain fucking awful. Thankfully though, this seems to be one of his better films. Now I'm going to split this video up into two sections. Right now I'm going to talk about the non-spoilery stuff, and then after that, I'm going to talk about the spoilery stuff, and I'll put a big warning on screen and I'll tell you guys it's coming. So, that's your warning. One of the first things I noticed when watching this movie was just the cinematography. I love the way the camera moves around this movie. It's integrated into the scene so well, and I love the way it follows the movements of characters. I love when cameras motion track movement of like people's hands moving and shit. A really good example of what I'm talking about is the camera movement in Upgrade. Throughout that movie, every single fight scene is so interesting because the camera's constantly following these characters' movements. And it's just like that here. With the added extra Shyamalan twist and little hints of horror, it really helps bring this movie to life. I also like the set design and just the setting in general. It just being the lonely cabin out in the woods, where these characters have to stay together because there's no help for miles and the car's tires are slashed. They kind of just have to defend themselves. So it's just really neat to see these characters trying to get out of this situation. The environment also leads to characters being able to do really cool action scenes. They're able to hit people with chairs and things lying around the cabin. And that just goes back to how the camera movements help these action scenes. All of the kills in this movie are very interesting. Honestly, the one thing I might criticize just a little bit is, for a rated R film, I kind of expected to see just like a little more gore. The kills in this movie aren't bad at all, and they're all very entertaining. It's just like, they kind of de-escalate as the movie goes on. And I know that's not really the point of it, it's just a little thing that I think could have made the movie a little extra better. But it's not like it takes away from the story at all. I was actually pretty impressed by all of the performances in this movie. Everybody acted pretty reasonable for how they'd act in a scenario like this, for that being the group of intruders and our main characters. The only other thing I might criticize is there was like occasional parts where they wanted the audience to laugh and be like, ah, haha, that was funny in this weird moment, but like, I don't know. Sometimes I'm like, that was stupid and shouldn't be in the movie, and on the other hand, knowing what the characters know and what they're going through and everything, people can cope in different ways. So it's really just a thing I keep going back and forth on, but overall, I think it would have just been better if they didn't try and make me laugh at any point. This movie's not supposed to be silly or fun. It's grim, it's upsetting, and it wants to disturb you. Dave Bautista does make me laugh though, and I don't think that's intentional. It's just like, the character talks so soothingly and relaxing, and he just kind of talks like a child sometimes, and it's just really funny to hear it coming from this behemoth of a man. Sleeves of tattoos, massive head wrinkles. He's terrifying, and yet he talks like a child, and it's just really fun for me. I'm pretty sure that's like the most I can talk about without getting into spoilers, so I'm gonna do the spoiler part of this video now. One of my favorite aspects of the film was it had the viewers constantly questioning whether the apocalypse was really about to happen, or whether these people were just homophobes who wanted to take out this couple. And throughout the entire film, we're given multiple clues to believe both scenarios. Now, we do inevitably end up finding out that the apocalypse shit was not bullshit and that they do need to make their sacrifice. So I guess by that logic, everything that would have led to it possibly being an attack because these guys are married was just kind of really coincidental. Like, really coincidental. It's just a coincidence that Ron Weasley beat the shit out of Andrew and then happened to be the guy who broke into his cabin later on in his life. The only problem I have with this though is nothing to do with the actual movie, but the marketing. They show in the second trailer for this film that the apocalypse is real, and that kind of takes away from the whole mystery of the movie. Thankfully, I only watched the first trailer and knew nothing after them just knocking and breaking into the fucking house. So I really enjoyed it, but it wasn't until I was getting footage for this video that I realized they completely spoiled that aspect of the film. Shame on you, marketing team! And as I said earlier, the cinematography is genuinely really good. Anything we are shown is usually brought back up later, and any questions you usually had are answered inevitably. And I know that kind of makes sense, because it's like, oh, well, you know, it's a movie, keep watching, but like, this movie does kind of get confusing as shit at points. It doesn't want you to be able to make a clear answer of what's going on. One thing I did really like about this movie was this interpretation of the apocalypse. Batista talks about it like it's some crazy shit. The sky will fall like shards of glass and God's hand will scorch the earth. Like, he says it like some crazy shit's gonna happen. It's not like it's not. It's just like more realistic almost. I actually really like the way they did the apocalypse here. Obviously there's fire set to the lands, but that's from random bolts of lightning and planes falling out of the fucking sky. Everything has an answer in this movie, and I think that also just really leads into the fact that throughout the movie you could think that it's fake. Andrew has an answer for almost everything they throw at him. And realistically, I really like that we get to watch him throughout this movie slowly stop believing his delusion, and ends up realizing that they're telling the truth. We realize that our antagonists are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, and I honestly think that was pretty neat. Knowing that that was how they wanted to take this movie makes a lot more sense, because these guys just being random people who got visions was just a little bit fucky to me, but them being the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse makes a lot more sense, and I liked that bit. I guess this was like the little Shyamalan twist. I'm surprised it wasn't that just the apocalypse was real, although I guessed that going into the movie, so. And as I said earlier, the performances are really good because the characters are pretty solid here. Like, they're not outstanding characters, they don't have all these different traits and personas and depth, but like, they are pretty good characters for this film. Out of our main characters, Yin, Andrew, and Eric are all great. They're actually a really great family to watch on screen. I like that that's the reason they're targeted. The 4 horsemen of the apocalypse had to convince these people to sacrifice something beautiful for the fate of the world, and I think that's neat how that all ties into it. This family's love was so strong, the universe had to put an end to it. Andrew and Eric are really good characters to watch on screen because they contrast each other really well. Eric tries to hear out their kidnappers and actually try and listen to them, not really give in to their quote-unquote delusion, but like at least hear them out to see if they can get out of this situation calmly. But Andrew just kind of wants to beat these guys up reasonably. He threatens to kill them on multiple occasions, and if you've seen the movie, you know that he does get a nice shot off on one of them. That was actually one of my favorite parts about Andrew's character. Ever since Ron Weasley beat the shit out of him in a bar, that man learned how to protect himself and his family. He learned how to fight, and he bought a gun and learned how to shoot. He's the definition of fuck around and find out. I love that as soon as these guys broke in, Andrew and Eric had themselves ready to fight them too. In the trailer, I was just like, did they really just put a fucking chair in front of the door? But they put up a really good fight in the film. Andrew absolutely demolishes Mr. Weasley, and I think it's great knowing that Weasley beat him up prior. So, revenge. And even though Eric does want to talk things through, when he is upset, he is fighting these captures. They are not taking this scenario lightly, and it's completely reasonable. And I think Yin might go down as being one of my favorite child characters in any movie with this being a scenario. She listens to her parents, and she's already a really smart little kid. She doesn't even want to talk to Dave Bautista at first. You know how, like, Georgie talks to a fucking clown in the sewer? Well, Yin's smart and knows not to talk to strangers. Now, it doesn't work that well, but, like, you know, she's a child. But at least she says no at first, and immediately runs inside and tells her dads about the bad men outside. So you know what? She did more than most children would in this movie scenario. Overall, I really liked the family dynamic they had. They were a very loving family, and that's heavily shown here. 2 great dads in my book. They did everything they could to keep themselves and their daughter safe, and they still walked out on top. Well, yeah, kinda. Now for our antagonists. The only real interesting one was Leonard, played by Dave Bautista. The rest of them, I don't even remember their fucking names. There's Ron Weasley, who I think his name was Redmond. But I just remember his name because he was going by a false name for no reason. And then there was the nurse lady and basically Jenny Slate. So out of those characters, we end up finding out that, yeah, they are the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse. Or like the 4 great qualities of humanity. I'm not really sure what they were going for. So you had Malice, who was Ron Weasley. Nurture, who was Jenny Slate. Guidance, who was Dave Bautista, and Healing, who was the nurse lady. Boy, it would be great if I remembered their names. So I honestly think this makes it a little bit easier to understand why these characters are here, and I also think it adds to the fact that none of these people knew that they had to do what they had to do. They ended up just realizing they had to do awful shit at a cabin this weekend, and they had to just deal with it. All of the characters are pretty shooken in their own little way. Leonard's calm as shit for no reason, while Jenny Slate's over here making little funnies and trying to be Karening shit because, you know, she's like Nurture or whatever. So she's just kind of kooky and weird, and the nurse lady is skittish the entire time and hits them with shit because she's like, no, don't leave! And then she's like, I can heal you! And, you know, that's conflicting. And Ron's an asshole. So, for people we don't like, they kind of just fit the, you know, they fit all the right margins and places. And our protagonists don't really give a shit about all that. They kind of just don't want their family to be tied up and they don't want to have to deal with this. But neither do these people. And I think that's why it makes these antagonists so interesting. They don't want to be doing what they're doing. So, it's weird because although awful shit is happening, they are, like, kind of on the same side. But it's not until these characters wait longer and longer to prevent the apocalypse that we watch the antagonists slowly fucking kill themselves in the most horrific ways. Which, you know, usually just ends up being beaten to death with whatever fucking tools they stitched together with a different tool. I think I'm pretty sure Batista's walking around with a fucking rake axe or some shit. I think these characters being vulnerable is why they are pretty interesting. They don't want to die, but they do know they have to. I think the chilling thought knowing that Jenny Slate had a son is fucked up, and I think her telling us his name right before they decide to beat her head in with a fucking mace is pretty fucked up. And they don't want to shy away from that. So that part is interesting, and I do think that information makes these characters memorable. But the most memorable one is Leonard. He's the only character we really stick with throughout the whole movie besides our main characters, because, you know, everybody else dies before him. And he does not go down easy at all. He got a fucking bullet to the arm, made no noise, and then tackled this guy through a fucking shower curtain. Don't fuck with him. These guys can hold their own against everybody but Drax the Destroyer. Pro wrestler Dave Batista is not going down without a fight. I do think these characters could have been a little more interesting. I don't know, I think they just could have used some more characteristics and just writing in general, but they aren't really anything to complain about. They're just kind of dead bodies on our count. The only thing that I really think should be changed is Jenny Slate trying to be funny. Also, I apologize to Jenny Slate and this actress for referring to her as Jenny Slate. I just think they kind of look alike. I think the last thing I want to talk about is the final scene of the entire film. Throughout this movie, we're shown flashbacks where the family used to listen to this song, Boogie Shoes, and it's in the trailer. Nice little dance song for this family to sing together. It's real fun, nice little tradition they have. At the end of the film, once Eric is dead and the only ones left are Andrew and Wynn, he turns on the radio and Boogie Shoes is on. And for a second I was like, wow, after all that, this really does not fit the end of this movie. And then he just turned it off after a second. And I was like, oh shit, okay. He didn't expect that to be on. And then Wynn turned the radio back on because she likes this song and she wanted to appreciate it with her dad. But then after seeing how he reacts to it, she turns it back off again, and they're in silence. She's understanding that her father's still upset and maybe this isn't the moment for music, to just be happy and get on with their lives. But then he pays attention to how she just turned that on, and he turns it back on, showing that they really can just grieve together and move on, that it will be okay, and that they have a longer life to live because of the sacrifice they made that day. And I think it's a really powerful scene with absolutely no dialogue. Definitely my favorite scene of the whole movie. It's really powerful, and it doesn't even need to say anything for you to know exactly what's going through the characters' heads, and that's great storytelling. So I'm proud of you, Mr. Chameleon. Overall, I really can't complain too much about Knock at the Cabin. There's nothing I really didn't like, and obviously it could have had a little more elements to, you know, make it great, but I'm gonna give it a 7 out of 10. I really enjoyed it. It was pretty good, and I'll probably watch it again at some point. Hey, I just realized by accident that I was accidentally calling Wynn Yin throughout this video. I'm gonna be honest, I didn't really remember her name, and I didn't really remember the other character's name either. I'm surprised I was even able to not mismatch Eric and Andrew, so there's that. I'm sorry for anybody who's upset that I got her name wrong.